In this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast, we are joined by Greg Amman of Fox Sports. Then later in the show, we will be joined by Steve Versnick of Sports Day Tampa Bay. We'll talk to those guys next on this edition of the Bucs Report. Let's go! Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. You can find this podcast on the Bucs Report. Check it out online at bucsreport.com. You can also find it on YouTube. Just search for the Bucs Report. And of course, you can find it wherever you get your audio podcasts. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Bucs Minutecast. So in this edition, we are joined by Greg Amman and Steve Versnick as we talk about this Bucs team and what can we expect going forward. We'll talk to them next. In this edition of the Bucs Report, we are happy to say that we have Greg Amman of Fox Sports. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hope you're doing well.
So just taking a look at this Bucs team, they are looking for an identity at the end of the day. The Bucs are 5-5. They're in first place in the NFC South. They're 500 at this point. They're playing the Browns this coming weekend. They're 3-7. But taking a look at the inconsistent play, 3 straight losses, 1 to the Steelers, 1 to the 3-8 Panthers, and 1 to the Ravens. And then they pick up 2 big wins against the Rams and Seahawks. What is the identity of this Buccaneers team?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still figuring it out. But no, I think when they're healthy, they're a much better team, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks. You know, there's some disappointing. Some of the losses don't get any better. Some of the wins probably have, seeing as how they beat the Cowboys in week 1. But yeah, I mean, they've had losses that still don't hold up very well. I think the fact that they're getting back closer to full strength on defense, getting Akeem Hicks, getting Carlton Davis back, getting Antoine Winfield back, those are all things that kind of point in the right direction. Their whole thing is trying to have, wins they can stack together. Like you said, more consistent play. And Cleveland, I mean, if you look at Cleveland, 3-7, that's a team they should be able to beat even on the road, especially with an extra week, to rest and prepare like they have.
I guess one of the things that the Bucs have to look out for is one of those what they call trap games where you think you're going to go into it. And I'm like, we're playing the Browns. This should be a slam dunk. And then you kind of take your eye off the ball. So one of the other big things for the Buccaneers, the biggest thing, I guess I would say, is who is going to be the quarterback next year. I was listening to a Locked On Bucs today, and James Yarko was talking about the possibility of Tom Brady coming back next year to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Is that a crazy thought? I mean, now that he's not with Giselle anymore, there's not that pressure to retire anymore. He can kind of go out and do what he wants to do. What do you think the long-term plans are for Tom Brady in the QB position for the Bucs?
Yeah, I don't think Tom knows what he's doing after this season right now. I mean, this is one of those things where they could miss the playoffs. They could go to the playoffs and win multiple games. Either of those outcomes could have an impact on his decision. Does he really want to go out missing the playoffs? Does he want to go out with the disappointment of, another second week or third week playoff loss? So no, I think it's way too early to try and figure out what he's doing. We don't know how his off-field throw, his divorce, we don't know how that affects his desire to play another year. Does that change the time he wants to spend with his family? I think you kind of just have to address this year right now. It still feels, he's 45. He's had enough problems on and off the field this year where it feels like the logical default is still that this is his last year and he's going to retire. Could go somewhere else. I think we've seen this year with Matt Ryan, with Russell Wilson, you can go somewhere else late in a career after one long run at a place, and it doesn't always go as well as it did for him here in Tampa. So for him to roll the dice a second time would take a really good situation for him, I think. I don't know How he'll decide things, there's really all three still in play in terms of retiring, staying with the Bucs, playing somewhere else. But I think right now, with him 5-5 with 7 weeks to go, it's naive to think that even he knows what he's doing now in 2023 right now.
So just taking a look at who the Bucs have at QB right now, they have Gabbert and Kyle Trask, who's kind of been redshirted his entire tenure with this Bucs team. Who is the heir apparent for this Bucs team? You know, you take a look at a lot of the teams around the league and they have their backup guy. You can take a look at the Packers. They probably have Love in the wings. Who is that, you know, the quarterback that is going to take over next for the Bucs?
Yeah, again, I don't think we know right now. I mean, if Brady's gone after this year, you know, there's chances are they haven't seen anything in a real game of Kyle Trask to know whether he's the answer or not. So I can't imagine they'd go in with only him as the option or him as the presumed starter, I guess. You know, this is a team that's still going to have a fair amount of talent on it. It's still going to have a team that can compete for a playoff spot. So I would think if Brady's not back there, they're bringing in some kind of veteran, somewhere between Kyle Trask and Tom Brady. There's a fair amount of middle ground between those two. I don't know that Blaine Gabbert is the answer. I think he's a good backup and that he knows this offense. But I don't think he's somebody that just hand the team over to next year.
And I was reading some of your work in The Athletic talking about the run game. Why are the Bucs so driven to use the run game so much? And one of the questions, why do the Bucs continue to use the run game so much? Until Sunday, they had the worst run game in the league. One of your thoughts was, I think early running is a way to force time off the clock. Talk to me a little bit about your comments there about why the Bucs have been so reliant on using the run game, where Tom Brady seems to excel at making those really great passes.
Yeah, I don't think they're relying on the run game. I mean, Tom Brady's on pace for like 725 passes, which is the most in his career, like second most in NFL history. So they're still throwing the ball a lot. Right. You know, so when they run the ball, again, they're not very good at running the ball. They're just ahead of the Rams to avoid being the worst in the NFL. But I think it's twofold. I think it runs clock off, which definitely keeps the defense off the field. And I think honestly, it's just every time that Tom Brady isn't driving back, they know he's not getting hurt. They know it's not a risk of injury. Right. So there's some self-preservation involved there. They definitely can be better when they run, whether it's Fournette or Rashad White or whoever's carrying the ball. They definitely showed a better glimpse of what they can be against the Seahawks in Munich in terms of, rushing for over 150 yards, having Rashad White go over 100 by himself, really doing well in short yardage situations. I think they were 7 for 7 in 3rd and 3 or less. So they definitely can be better than they've been. I think most any team in the NFL is going to have more yards when they throw than when they run. That's just the nature of downfield passing. So I think, you look at these last 2 years where Brady's throwing for 4,000, 5,000 yards. He's got 40 touchdowns. He's got 43 touchdowns. So to see him drop off to where now, he's going to do well to get to 20 touchdowns. It's a different offense. It's a safer, more conservative offense. I don't know how much of that is by design, how much of that is Brady not having the same confidence in a newer, younger offensive line. But you're not going to confuse it with last year's offense right now.
So some good news, I guess, for the Buccaneers as Giovanni Bernard is ready to make his comeback. One of the things I'm going to say about this Bucs team is they are kind of getting stacked at the running back position. I know Fournette is injured, and I guess I don't know the timetable of when he's going to return. Rashad White, who seems to be having just this breakout season, really a bright spot, and Keyshawn Vaughn. Talk to me a bit about the running back position. It seems, despite what we talked about, with, the run game not being that great at times, certain players like Rashad White, for example, and having Giovanni Bernard, it seems like they're poised to be a lot better going forward. Yeah,
I don't know that a healthy Gio Bernard changes this run game very much. He's been a real marginal impact guy in his 2 seasons here. So, the question is whether he'd even dress when he's healthy. They generally dress 3 running backs. So if Fournette's healthy, if White's healthy, it just comes down to Vaughn or Bernard getting that 3rd running back chance to dress. I think there's 2 carries total all season from the number 3 running backs. They really haven't utilized their depth very much at all, not in catching passes, not in running the ball. They've leaned on their top 2 all season long. So it's nice to have Gio back. And if they weren't comfortable with either of the top 2 in that 3rd down role that Gio kind of had for part of last season, he's another option there. But those backup running backs don't do a whole ton on special teams. I think they'd probably dress 3 of the 4, no matter who's healthy. So it's good to get them back. I don't think it's going to wildly change their run game or how good they are at that.
All right, one last question for you here. Just taking a look at it, I would say one of the players that this Bucs team is missing the most, and I know there's nothing we can do about it, but Rob Gronkowski, they kind of went out and tried to sign Kyle Rudolph and tried to find these players to rectify that situation. We're really kind of starting to see the impact of Gronk missing from this lineup. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Gronk's a Hall of Famer, maybe the best tight end ever play. So you knew he would be missed. You see it in the red zone. You see it in third downs. I don't think anybody expected Kyle Rudolph to step in and be Rob Gronkowski. I think could have done more than he has. He has 2 catches for 20 yards on the season. So he's barely dressing on Sundays. And again, I think there's that hope and that, wish from fans that Gronk would come back. I still don't think that's happening right now. So tight end has not been a real impactful position. I think they've been really pleased with what Cade Otton has done for them. Right. Especially with some downfield catches he's made in recent weeks. He's arguably probably the most impact of any rookie tight end in the NFL right now. And I think that role will continue to grow. Obviously, Cam Brate, missing time with a concussion, missing time with a neck injury has taken away his impact. So these last 7 games, in theory, can be, a little bit more from the tight end than they've had. But right now, I don't think they have 400 yards on the position right now. So Gronk or not, this is probably one of the more underperforming tight end groups in the NFL. But again, I think, they like what they have moving forward in Cade Otton and O'Keefe, his 2 rookies that play a ton on special teams. It'll be a younger position moving forward, but they can definitely do more in the last 2 months than they have with it.
All right, Greg. And now of Fox Sports. Now he's not just covering the Bucs; he's covering the entire NFC South. A great honor to talk to you. I have read your work 4 years. If you are a Bucs fan, you have undoubtedly seen Greg Auman or learned a lot about the Bucs from Greg Auman. So thank you once again for joining us on this edition of the Bucs Report.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me. Have a good rest of the day.
Many thanks to Greg Auman of Fox Sports, formerly of The Athletic. After the break here, we will have Steve Versnick of the Sports Day Tampa Bay podcast. It's a must listen if you are a Bucs fan. We'll talk to Steve next. All right, in this edition of the Bucs Report, we are happy to say that we have Steve Versnick on the show. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So just taking a look at this Bucs team, one way you could characterize them is a bit inconsistent, maybe looking for a bit of an identity. The Bucs are 5-5 in the NFC South. They are in first place. The next team they play is the Cleveland Browns. They are 3-7. So the Bucs had 3 straight losses to the Steelers, Panthers, and Ravens. The Panthers, who are 3-8, and then 2 straight wins against the Rams and Seahawks. So I guess you could say inconsistency would be one way to summarize this Bucs team.
Very inconsistent. We've seen, go back to the Dallas game, the first game. They saw the run game thrive, and everyone was like, playoff Lenny's back and Lombardi Lenny's back. And then the run game has been non-existent for a long time, and Tom Brady's back to throwing 700 and some passes a season. And then they're trying to establish the running game, but Lenny can't get it going. And now you're seeing Rachaad White, and so it'll be interesting coming off the bye week which running back they choose to go with primarily as they get that consistency. The defense has been pretty good all year, to be honest. I mean, you look at their points per game, you look at the production, they just can't lock it down in key times. And that's been the inconsistent part of it. It's frustrating because for 3/4 of a game, they'll play great. And then they'll give up 2 big drives in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden you lose the game. Now, had the offense scored a few more points, that consistency part, that extra touchdown they give up in the fourth quarter probably doesn't matter. But when you're not scoring, that complimentary football we talk about, it's been inconsistent all season.
Yeah, and I guess maybe part of that could be due in part to the quarterback, Tom Brady, who has had a rough year, suffices to say. He got divorced from his wife. There was that whole cryptocurrency thing. So just taking a look at the QB position, that is the most important position, I would say, on the team. What is the outlook, do you think, at the QB position for the Bucs? I heard James Yarko talk on the Locked On Bucs podcast today that he was thinking that there is a possibility that Tom Brady comes back to this team next year. What do you think the odds are of that?
Tell me who's blocking for him in front of him, because a lot of the inconsistencies this year in the offense has to do with that interior of the offensive line. Now, presumably Ryan Jensen will be back next year. We know Tristan Wirf should be there, but who else do you have? I mean, you can tell he does not trust his offensive line. He does not trust the protection. He is bailing on plays a lot quicker than he ever used to. And at 45 years old, I can't blame him for that. But if you don't trust your protection, then you're not going through your reads. You're not hitting those open guys. You're not hitting those big plays, which alleviates some of the pressure off the offense. So, for him to come back next year, let's see how this season finishes up. Let's see how the coaching staff shakes out. Todd Bowles took over as head coach. This isn't his staff. Now, he coached with a lot of these guys under Bruce Arians, but when you get hired in April, May, whatever it was, you didn't get to redo the staff. Is Byron Leftwich the guy he wants to be the offensive coordinator? I don't know. Could Byron Leftwich get a job somewhere? That's possible too. Defensive coordinators, he promoted guys up. But I mean, like I said, in April and May, you don't get a chance to go through the NFL and decide who you want. So, what does the team look like next year? And cap situation has affect this too. I mean, do they need to make a decision on Mike Evans next year based on salary and knowing how much you're already paying Chris Godwin and this, so there's a lot of things up in the air. I think you got to see how this season finishes first before Tom Brady makes a decision on A, playing next year, and then B, is Tampa Bay an option for that? If they go out and don't win this division and finish with a losing record, do we think he might come back here? I don't know. Like I said, I think there's a lot of questions that would have to shake out first.
So now if Brady opts to retire, the Bucs can process the retirement. So the cap hit is split between the 23-24 season. I think it's like $12 million in 23 and $23 million in 24, but some short-term savings. So again, for optimal right now cap savings on a player with voidable years, you want to re-sign them before the current deal voids, writes Greg Amman. So the question for the Buccaneers right now is there doesn't seem to be a clear heir apparent at the QB position. You take a look around the league, you could say, for the Packers, it could be Love. He could step in ostensibly, if Rodgers decides to retire. Who is that guy on the Bucs? You take a look at Trask, redshirted pretty much his whole career except for the preseason. In Gabbert, I don't know if he's ready for prime time. Who is the next quarterback for the Bucs if Tom Brady decides to walk away?
Well, I think in an ideal world, your next quarterback's not on the roster at this time.
Right.
Now, who's available and who can you go get, whether free agency or a trade? That's yet to be determined, and time will tell that. I think if Blaine Gabbert's your quarterback, I think you're rebuilding next year. I don't think you're not in it to win the Super Bowl at that point. I think he's a serviceable NFL quarterback, and you're not necessarily tanking. But you asked about voidable years on contracts and salary cap implications. I think if Brady were retiring, let's just take that hypothetical. You may want all the cap hit next year if your quarterback is Blaine Gabbert. If you go sign a free agent and Aaron Rodgers, or you go make a trade for another quarterback or sign another quarterback and you think you have a shot to win it, then you may want to spread it out because you're going to want to put money for next year. So I don't think you know what you want to do with your cap yet next year until you know who your quarterback is. And when Brady makes that decision, I don't know. I mean, unlike last year, Brady was under contract with the Buccaneers, so he could only play with the Buccaneers or retire or request a trade, and if the Buccaneers traded his rights or let him go somewhere. This year, he's an unrestricted free agent, so he can do whatever he wants, and he can wait as long as he wants to make that decision. He could wait till free agency. He could wait till next training camp and sign somewhere. And that's the hard part of, Jason Light's relationship with Tom Brady and how that'll shake out in the offseason if Brady wants to come back. Now, if he says, I'm done, I'm through with football, I'm 45, I'll be 46 and I'm done, then it makes it easy. But if there's a slight bit he might come back, I think the Bucs leave that door open as long as possible.
I mean, I think they would be foolish not to do that. There's been talk that he might want to play for the 49ers. That's where he kind of grew up in that area. I've heard crazy stories out there, as you can imagine, that he wants one last hurrah with the Patriots. I don't really see that materializing. But moving on here a bit and talking about the running back position, it seems like, with Leonard Fournette out, and I don't hear a timetable for his return, it is a pleasant surprise to see the play of Rachaad White on this team. He's this studious guy that Tom Brady said brought a notebook to practice during summer camps. Seems to be a really have a bright future with this Bucs team. Do you think that makes Leonard Fournette obsolete at some point? If you have Rachaad White and then maybe Keyshawn Vaughn and Giovanni Bernard, so it's starting. There's more options at the running back position. Talk to me a little bit about Rachaad White and what is the future with Leonard Fournette on this football team?
Well, I mean, look, it's no secret in the NFL with salary cap, you need young guys on rookie contracts. You had hoped Keyshawn Vaughn was going to be that running back a couple years ago when you drafted him. Never really materialized to a point where he's a regular. When he's gotten in, particularly in the playoffs last year, he did pretty well, but he hasn't. Rachaad White, you needed him to step up this year. Yes, you signed Leonard Fournette to a 3-year big contract, probably too big for a running back, but you didn't have any other options at that point. You're obviously not convinced Keyshawn Vaughn's the answer. Gio Bernard hasn't been able to stay healthy in his 2 seasons here in Tampa Bay. So you had to sign, when you're forced to sign free agents, that's usually a bad thing in the NFL. Right. You want to sign a free agent to fill a hole here and there, but if you're forced to because you don't have any other options on your roster, that's a bad situation to be in. And that's the situation the Bucs were with running back based on, Ronald Jones moved on. Keyshawn Vaughn hasn't developed the way you had hoped when you drafted him where you did. You needed to hit on Rachaad White. So far, it looks like you have. Time will tell over time. But so far, as he's gone through the season, he's progressing and getting better and better. That's what you need from young guys. I don't think Leonard's obsolete at all. I think you need a 1-2 punch in this league for running back, unless you have a Derrick Henry type. But even he takes plays off and sits out. As much as we're hearing Leonard Fournette is sulking, and whether that's true or not, I mean, I don't have a problem if a guy doesn't want to come off the field. That's a good thing. If you're truly sulking about it, that's a different issue. So time will tell with Leonard. And we know he's been through this before. He was, Bruce Arians almost cut him because he was upset he wasn't playing over Ronald Jones. Ended up becoming Lombardi Lenny. If it's just, right. Leonard's, a little emotional and sometimes in the heat of the moment gets, okay, that happens. And that you can work through that. And if that's the case, that's okay. But you need Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette together as a combination.
Yeah, it was kind of an an interesting moment where Rachaad White, the rookie, had to console Leonard Fournette about this supposed sulking. Like you were talking about, I'm not going to fault a guy if he cares that much, if he's that upset that he's not getting all the plays. As long as it doesn't turn into Antonio Brown's territory, then I think we're okay there. But a really bright spot on this Bucs team here. Rachaad White was nominated for Pepsi Rookie of the Week. It's a fan vote with results Friday. White had 22 carries and 105 yards while helping put the game away in Munich. So just a really bright spot going forward for the Bucs. I'm really happy that he's on this team, and the future looks bright at that position. The next player I'm going to talk about here, and I think that the Bucs are really starting to notice his absence a little bit more than a lot of the other players, and you could say this is Tom Brady's right-hand man, Rob Gronkowski. The Bucs went out and they tried to rectify the situation by signing Kyle Rudolph, but he really hasn't lived up to potential. He was a healthy scratch and inactive in half of the Bucs' 10 games and barely a factor in the other half. This is a former Pro Bowler who has nearly 500 catches. Talk to me a little bit about, the impact of Rob Gronkowski, and a good thing that they have other players like O'Keefe on the team to help pick up the slack.
Well, and I think a pleasant surprise, I shouldn't say surprise, but you love seeing the development of Cade Otton in the passing game. Yeah. He's becoming a weapon, Tom, as you can see his growing confidence and trust in, because he's throwing it to him more and more and targeting him more, which, we know how much Tom Brady loves throwing to tight ends. But I think the biggest area you miss Rob Gronkowski is we've talked so much this year about the offensive line, and you lose Ryan Jensen. Basically, the first day of training camp or second, whatever day it was. And then, Ali Marpet retired, Alex Kappa left, and your replacements. But you forget that sixth offensive lineman in the blocking game was Rob Gronkowski. And he, as great as he is offensively and the touchdowns and him and Tom Brady's chemistry together, what he does in the running game for New England for all those years in that, you can't speak enough of, and no one does. Because it's an area no one looks at, but he's that sixth offensive lineman, which makes Lenny better, or Ronald Jones, or Keyshawn Vaughn, or whatever running back there. I think they missed that. I mean, Cole Keefe's been good. Otton's, he's more of a passing tight end, but that complete package that Rob Gronkowski is, he's not just a receiver. He does everything at the tight end position and does it all to an elite level. you're trying to replace that with one guy, and you can't. It's impossible. And in the running game too, when you lose Chris Godwin for part of the year, he's a tremendous run blocker as well from that slot receiver position. So at the beginning of the year, no Gronk, no Godwin, and your 3 interior offensive linemen were all new. No wonder why the running game struggled. It was amazing that in Dallas they did so well, and then after that it struggled.
Right. And then just taking a look at it, Gronkowski, a big impact. He like a real heart and soul player. So, I mean, I think that this team misses him a lot. I know that different people had said that he's going to come back. His agent, his girlfriend said that he was going to come back. But at the end of the day, I just don't see it happening. I think he was a little too shook up last year when he sustained that major injury against the Rams. I think it was a collapsed lung and everything else. He said it was the worst pain he had ever been in. In this next part here, I'm going to talk about something that I heard you and Rick talk about on your podcast. Was Ndamukong Suh to the Eagles. The Bucs went with Akeem Hicks over Suh. Hicks, who's had his own issues with injury. Suh never missed a game due to injury, would have been better served to re-sign Suh. I did hear what you guys had to say on your show. What are your thoughts? Do you think, it was a good idea, Monday morning quarterbacking, if you will, that they went in the direction they did as far as Ndamukong Suh is concerned?
Well, tell me how much Ndamukong Suh would have signed here for. And did he really want to play a full season? I mean, those are things we don't know. We assume. I mean, we kind of assume that every player wants to play as long as they can get a contract. And for most players, that's probably true. But Ndamukong Suh's made a ton of money. I mean, even from his rookie deal, he was on those, make $200 million before you take a snap in the NFL. It's a little exaggeration, but, so he's made his money. Did he want to be here? Now, some of the tweets and stuff he did once Todd Bowles became the coach, it seemed like he did. But at some point, you have to see what your young guys are made of. You drafted Logan Hall. Vita Vea is growing and developing. At some point, you've got to see if these guys are it. In hindsight, would Ndamukong Suh have made this defense better? Absolutely. Although I think you see when Akeem Hicks is in there, that run defense is pretty good again. And Vita Vea looks like a star again. When he doesn't have a good player next to him, I won't say he's struggling because I still think he's taking up 2 defenders at a time and defenses are still scheming towards him, but he's not as effective because the guys next to him aren't as good. When Akeem Hicks is healthy, we're seeing that run defense get better, which is what we saw with Ndamukong Suh. Akeem Hicks is doing it cheaper, which allows you to sign more players elsewhere and do other things. And, you're looking to the future. You need Vita Vea to take that. I mean, that's the whole part of young guys on rookie deals is you've got to put them in a position to take the next step to know whether you're going to continue with them or need to go get younger again and try again. I mean, that's, we'll equate sports, but the Lightning, I mean, that's what they did with Brendan Hagel and Mikhail Sergachev is they think they're ready to take the next steps to replace Andre Palat and Ryan McDonough. In a salary cap world, you have to do that periodically. And it's, that's the calculation they made. Now, Akeem Hicks was hurt for a while. Would you have rather had Ndamukong Suh? Sure. How much would he have cost and how would that impacted the rest of the roster? That's something you have to consider too.
Yeah, and it's one of the things where you try to make the best decision at any given time. When you looked at this team in the preseason, I thought to myself, this team is stacked. They are going to make a solid push for the Super Bowl. And then the thing that kind of started everything out was Jensen getting injured. And I thought to myself, are you kidding me? That really happened. And kind of just this fluke accident. And that kind of, led to, a bunch of other players. And then I think to a certain extent that kind of rattled Tom Brady because he was used to working with Jensen. And I don't know if he's had necessarily that success. All right. So the Bucs are playing the Browns next here. They are 3-7. What are your predictions as far as that game is concerned? It's, one of the things I want the Bucs to avoid is one of those, what they call a trap game, where you're playing this team that is perceived to be not nearly as good. So you kind of go into it half cocked and then the team just runs you over. See the Panthers game, for example. Talk to me a little bit about the game coming up.
I don't know if it's so much a trap game. I worry about the start. We know this season, Tom Brady has criticized the team for some of the work ethic. We know Todd Bowles has talked about guys living off the Super Bowl. You just got a big win in Germany. You get the bye week. You get that week off. What did the players do? How did they come back? And how is practice and everything going this week? I worry about the start. They finally started clicking in Germany, and now you take a week off. And how does that affect and impact things? If guys just got rest and stayed focused for the most part and took some downtime, but that then it could be a good thing. I mean, bye weeks 2 years ago, the bye week was tremendous. They did a lot of changes in self-scouting and changed kind of the offensive scheme and some of the things Tom Brady likes to do. And it turned out to be great. And they rode that all the way to the Super Bowl. Bye weeks can be great. They can also be bad if players check out, and that happens at times. And so, I think the bye week probably came at a bad time for this team. 2 or 3 weeks ago, you'd have said it would have been a great time for it. When it came, it doesn't. So we'll see how they respond to that. I think if they get off to a good start, I think they'll be fine. I don't think this Browns team is that good. They've got pieces, but they've just never been able to put it together for whatever reason in Cleveland. It's been that way for decades now. So I think if they get off to a good start, I think it's good. If they struggle early, then I think it's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, I'm just hoping for a big win to go forward here. I mean, 500, and it seems pretty much locked that they will win the NFC South. Let's really hope that happens.
Well, but you lose at Cleveland, and if Atlanta wins, you're in second place. I mean,
right.
Atlanta hasn't had their bye week yet. That's coming in a couple weeks, so there's a half game difference there. But you can sit there and say you think they'll win the NFC South. They should win the NFC South, and on paper and by the roster, yeah, you would say that. But you're a half game up. I mean, that's and if you lose that game this Saturday, now you're tied with them through the same number of games, and based on their outcome this week would determine who's leading. But it's not a foregone conclusion. I mean, and if you would have said at the beginning of the year they were going to be in a dogfight with someone, I would have said it would have been New Orleans, not Atlanta, which is, kudos to Atlanta and what they've done.
Right. Kind of a real about face for that team. I don't think anyone really saw that coming. So, Steve, thank you for joining us on this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast. I would call your podcast with Rick a must listen for any Bucs fan. I listen to it every day before work. I want to know what's going on with the Bucs. You got to listen to that podcast. You also cover the Rays and Lightning. Why don't you tell everyone here where else we can find your work?
My work or the Sports Day Tampa Bay, you can find obviously anywhere you get podcasts. That's with Rick Stroud. As you said, Bucks, Lightning, Rays, USF, college football. We talk about it all. My work, I do a little bit of everything. So I handle a lot of the radio broadcasts for the Tampa Bay Lightning, for the Tampa Bay Rays, for USF, among many other things I do. So if you listen to Phil Esposito and Dave Michigan, then I'm right there in the booth with them, producing and handling all their broadcast stuff. So that's my biggest gig, I guess you would say.
All right, Steve, once again, thanks for joining us on this edition. A real honor to meet you. Like I say, I listen to you every day on the podcast, so it was great to get an opportunity to talk to you.